There is a particular kind of loneliness that does not begin with being alone. It begins with reaching toward someone, expecting a face to soften, and watching that face turn away, not with indifference exactly, with fear, with disgust, with the sudden knowledge that whatever you are, whatever you feel, whatever hunger for love has just opened inside you. The world has already decided it cannot bear the sight of you. That is the wound at the centre of Frankenstein. Not lightning, not laboratories, not a monster rising from a table. Those images belong partly to the long afterlife of the story, to the shadows cast by adaptations and Halloween masks. Mary Shelley's novel is stranger, sadder, and more intimate than that. It asks what happens when a living being is brought into the world, then immediately refused by the person who made him. It asks what creation means if it ends at the moment of success, and it asks whether the monster is born in the body or made in the abandonment that follows. Most of us know Frankenstein through a simplified shape. A brilliant man creates life, the creature becomes dangerous, and everyone pays the price. But the novel lingers because that shape is not enough. Victor makes something that can feel, learn, suffer, remember, and ask to be loved. Then he looks at it and runs. That first flight matters. In the emotional life of the book, the second birth may be more important. The creature is made once in Victor's room. He is made again when Victor abandons him. Because to be created is not the same thing as being welcomed. A life can begin without belonging beginning with it. Victor has dreamed of glory. In his mind, creation is achievement, discovery, a triumph that will reflect back on him. Then the life he has made opens its eyes, and Victor cannot love the consequence of his own desire. That is one of the quiet horrors of Frankenstein, the gap between wanting to create life and being willing to care for it. The creature does not ask to exist. He does not choose his body, his face, his isolation, or the terror he causes in others. He wakes into the world already carrying a burden he cannot understand. He reaches for the one person who might owe him tenderness, and that person disappears. In another story, this might be the beginning of a villain. In Shelley's novel, it is the beginning of a wound. The creature learns the world almost the way a child would, through sensation, hunger, cold, language, observation, and the ache of watching human connection from outside it. He is frightening before he understands why. He is rejected before he has done anything to deserve rejection. And because the book lets him speak, because it gives him a mind and a memory, we cannot keep him safely at the distance of a monster. That is what makes the story painful. Not that he becomes dangerous, that he was not dangerous enough at first to stop anyone from hurting him. There is a scene shape that repeats in the creature's life. He approaches, he hopes, he reveals himself, and the world recoils. Again and again, the possibility of love appears close enough to wound him. He watches a family from the edge of their life and learns from them. He sees affection before he receives it. He understands care as something real, something practiced in rooms he is not allowed to enter. To witness love is not the same as having it, but for someone starving, even the sight of bread can feel like proof that bread exists. Then he tries to step into the human circle, and the circle breaks. This is where Frankenstein becomes less a story about one abnormal being, and more a story about what rejection teaches. A person can be told they are monstrous long before they behave monstrously. If every hand is raised against you, if every face reads you as a threat, if tenderness is withdrawn before you can prove you deserve it, then the self begins to form around that judgment. Not because rejection excuses cruelty. It does not. The creature's violence matters. The grief he causes is real. Shelley does not give us an easy innocence to protect from moral consequence, but she also refuses to let us pretend violence appears from nowhere. The novel asks us to look at the chain: creation without care, fear without responsibility, rejection repeated until the rejected being learns the only role left open for him: monster. And that word is not only a description, it is what the world says when it wants to stop listening. And one of the reasons Frankenstein still feels alive is that this question has not gone away. We still create things we do not care for properly. We still abandon consequences once they stop flattering us. Victor's failure is not only that he wanted too much. It is that, once his desire took form, he refused relationship. He wanted the miracle without the obligation. He wanted to bring life into being without being changed by the needs of that life. That may be the most ordinary part of him. Not the science, not the secrecy, not the gothic extremity. The refusal, the wish to separate ourselves from what we have made when it becomes inconvenient, frightening, needy, or shameful. In that sense, Victor is not just a doomed overreacher. He is a portrait of responsibility failing at the exact moment responsibility becomes real. He does not. And from that absence, the whole tragedy begins to gather force. Victor is not emotionless. He suffers, he grieves. The novel does not make him a cartoon villain. It gives him fear, guilt, panic, and loss. But guilt is not the same as care. Horror is not the same as responsibility. Victor feels intensely, but his feeling keeps turning inward. He experiences the catastrophe as his own ruined life, while still failing to meet the being in front of him as someone with a claim upon him. The creature, meanwhile, becomes more than a victim. That matters too. If we make him only innocent, we flatten the book. He chooses revenge. He wounds the innocent. The rejected self becomes capable of rejection's own cruelty. But that complexity is exactly why the abandonment angle has force. The point is not that pain makes a person pure. The point is that pain can deform the part of a person that once reached outward in trust. Frankenstein is frightening because it understands that tenderness and rage can live very close together. The creature wants to be loved, but he also wants Victor to suffer the loneliness he has suffered. The tragedy is not that he has no humanity. The tragedy is that his humanity is visible even in the forms it takes after being starved. That is much harder to dismiss. A simple monster lets us feel safe. A wounded being who becomes monstrous asks something less comfortable from us. It asks where the wound began. It asks who turned away first. And it asks what might have been different if the first response had not been horror. This is why Frankenstein should not be reduced to a warning about knowledge. Knowledge matters in the book. Ambition matters. The danger of wanting to master life without humility matters. But underneath all of that is a quieter ethical question. What do we owe to what depends on us? Not what do we owe when it is beautiful. Not what do we owe when it reflects well on us. What do we owe when it frightens us, disappoints the fantasy we had before it existed, or carries our fingerprints but refuses to remain under our control? Victor's creature is extreme, but the pattern is familiar. Makers and consequences, societies and the people they push outside the circle, parts of ourselves we refuse to name until they return as fear. The monster can be read as a being in the world. He can also be read as the unwanted part of Victor's own life, the consequence, the shame, the responsibility Victor cannot integrate. And maybe that is why the story keeps finding new forms, because every age has its own abandoned creations. Every life has some part that was once tender, then learned to protect itself by becoming difficult to touch. This does not mean the book offers a simple cure. Frankenstein is too severe for that. By the time its characters understand the shape of what has happened, too much has already been broken. That is part of its sadness. It is not a story about how to fix the wound. It is a story about what happens when the wound is denied until it becomes fate. And maybe that is why the creature's loneliness is the part that stays. Because the book lets us remember the original gesture, a being reaching outward, before revenge, before blood, before the name monster has completely settled over him. There is a terrible tenderness in that image, a hand extended toward the one person who should not have turned away. A life asking, in its first confusion, whether there is a place for it here. Frankenstein endures because it does not let us answer too quickly. It does not let us say, simply, Victor was wrong to create, or the creature was wrong to destroy, and then leave the room unchanged. It holds the two truths together. Creation without responsibility is dangerous. Pain without care can become dangerous too. And the thing we call monstrous may sometimes be the shape a wound takes after being left alone too long. So when we return to Frankenstein, maybe the question is not only what kind of life Victor made, maybe it is what kind of life he refused to meet. Because the monster in this book is not only assembled from bodies, he is assembled from absence, from the missing hand, the unanswered need, the door closing at the exact moment love was required. And that is what Mary Shelley leaves us carrying. Not just the fear that we might create something beyond our control, but the deeper fear that something wounded might be standing in front of us, asking to be seen, and that we might become monstrous by looking away.